Oh, you can see the Air. Oh, that's cool. This is the Air of Nike Air. Hi, my name is Nicole McLaughlin, and I'm a designer who upcycles things, so I take old things and make them new. And so today I'm gonna be taking discarded shoes and turning them into a vest. I'd say upcycling is kind of just working with what you have. It's a resourceful type of design where there's already pre-existing things and just using that as a base to create something out of. I was creating these things and I didn't know that there was a term for it. And then it started being coined like on the internet that I'm an upcycling designer. I'd say my approach is to really keep and consider that child's sense of wonder. The way that I would think as a child and have like such a strong imagination for things, I really try to apply that to my work, and I always just allow myself the freedom to explore an idea. So today I'm gonna be taking discarded shoes and turning them into a vest by taking them apart, and I'm gonna lay them out flat just to get a feel for what the shoes are and what materials I wanna use, and then start sewing them by hand. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just lay down this vest. I'll be using a Carhartt jacket. I actually removed the sleeves and made that the vest base. I wanna see kind of what I'm working with in terms of material, shape, anything I wanna avoid, like this pocket here. Only because if I'm hand sewing, if I sew directly into it, it's gonna be really difficult to sew. I really love this Sherpa lining, so we'll see how that kind of meshes with all of the shoe parts that I'm about to take apart and include in this. So I have a bunch of shoes that are like half pairs, random, just kind of used and destroyed pairs of shoes, which I think color-wise, it's gonna be really bright and awesome. I get materials in a couple of different ways. Thrift stores just around the area, if they lose pairs of shoes, like if they only have half pairs of shoes, they'll be like to do with them. So it's been really cool to find another use for them. So I'm just gonna take the laces off, because once you remove the laces, you can kind of see how like the tongue is able to move a little bit more, and you start to get a better feel for like what you can use on the shoe. It is really like a puzzle, and just kind of figuring out what works and moving it around and kind of messing with it until it looks right. There really is no proper way to start doing this or going about it, but you just have to go with what the material is doing. I try not to alter it that much. I'm not completely deconstructing it and reconstructing it to the point where it's like not recognizable of what it was before. You know it's a part of a shoe. You know what that piece was on a shoe, and now it's on a garment, and you can really see that. Like that's beautiful, I love that. After college, I was really lucky to get an internship at Reebok in Boston. So I was doing graphic design for 4 years there, doing classics graphics. So I was doing like retro archive t-shirts and Allen Iverson jerseys and throwback things. I feel like I was able to understand clothing and shoes a lot better because that wasn't my background, that isn't anything I studied. But just being surrounded by it, you get curious, and then being surrounded by piles and piles of shoes that were getting discarded naturally made me very curious as well. It was really the perfect like breeding ground for what I do now, because it was like, there's just constant material for you to work with. All right, I think I have what we need to start this. I'm gonna grab X-Acto knives. I'm gonna get a fresh blade on here. And then this is the therapeutic part for me, where it's just taking apart the uppers off of the shoes and being careful not to slice your finger off. And then once the upper is off of it, I obviously have a perfectly intact sole that I'm able to use for other projects, which I do make a lot of shoes. And that's one of my most frequently asked questions is, where do I get the soles for my shoes? And so I always just say every pair of shoes has a sole on it, and so do with that as you will. And I've been taking apart shoes for like years now, but it took me a while to be able to do it like this, only because there's different ways that you can detach a shoe. There's different types of like glues and acetones and that kind of stuff that helps you remove it. I personally like to keep all of that. I just think that brings more character into the shoe. But then also sometimes I'll go in and you'll see these stitch lines here, which is called a strobel. And so sometimes if the shoe's not lifting up that easily, you can go in and cut those and it will help lift it up. The heel counter is always the hardest part, and you'll see me probably struggling to get it off on some of these shoes because it has the most stability within the shoe. But then we also might benefit from using a scissor on it as well. And I don't cut the whole thing with scissors because you don't get as clean of a line, but it's good for those small little pieces at the end. One of my favorite parts about this is seeing a 3D shape like this go flat, and how the details that make up the shoe, that gives it that accentuated 3D feel, put flat on a vest is just, I don't know, something about it is really unique. Ooh, and the backside too is really cool. I've been known to use the wrong side of the shoe just because I like the way that the back looks better. You gain more of this like tight mesh material, whereas the outside is very cleaned and finished. I kind of like the roughness of that side, but I think I'd prefer to maybe have that color pop. But we'll see what it looks like once I have all the pieces. Sometimes people approach sustainability with a very rigid mindset of, this is what it has to be, we have a target, we have to check that box, instead of just allowing the creative freedom to make something. There's so much that needs to be done that isn't being done right now, and just some really clear and simple solutions when it comes to circularity. I mean, that's a huge word that is used around upcycling, because it is just taking things that we've had for years and years and prolonging the life of it. I don't see myself designing any other way. I think now that I'm in the world of sustainability, I don't see myself going anywhere. It's kind of sad because these ones weren't really that worn, but there was no friend for it, so now it'll be possibly a pocket or something. That's another thing with like shoe uppers, you could do maybe like some type of pocket, which I love to include in my projects. Functionality is probably one of the most important things to my creation process. It's kind of the through line of my design. I love pockets. I love being able to store things. I love packing things, and the idea of like modular systems, things that don't have to be the same every time you wear it. Also, I switch out X-Acto knives pretty much every other shoe, just to make sure the blade is sharp and you're getting a nice clean edge on it. I think the X-Acto knife is just such a versatile tool. You can lift up stitches individually and kind of unveil what's underneath it, or just go really hard and just start ripping it off. That has to be the best feeling. Can you tell how much I love the X-Acto knife? Because I do. All right, the puzzle begins. This part is very like composition based, where you just have to move things around until you start to like the color and the position of things. I'm trying to focus on the kind of the curvature of the collar here. So I have this nice curved part of the toe box that I can include, and then it has more of a straight edge where it is along the shoe, so it'll be nice and flush along the zipper opening. And then just some fluidity within the arms here. I don't know if I've quite gotten there yet because that piece is a little too jagged, but something maybe that's more curved off will be able to fit there. So there's some like small sections that I don't have a piece for yet, but I think once I continue to get the larger shapes, I can start to fill in the smaller pieces. So I need to take apart a couple more shoes. This one because I know it's gonna be so hard to take apart, but I like the color and I don't have that much green. I only really have this like lime hit here and a little bit of the turquoise, but that green is kind of punchy. I mean, it's subtle, but I think it needs it to balance it out. I'm just wondering how I want to tackle this because it's gonna be tough, but we're here to have some challenges today, so. Getting a true workout today. That's how you know it's hard to get through. You have to use 2 hands on the scissor. No turning back now. I don't always love to credit it, but social media gave me the platform to be able to share these things and ultimately like make this possible. The reception in the beginning was it wasn't bad, it was just like, what is she doing? Like, is she okay? Like, why is she posting these things? And I still get that. I still get people just writing on it and just being like, well, why? And to me, I'm just kind of like, well, why not? I mean, someone has to put tennis balls on their foot and call it a shoe. Like, someone has to be the one to do it and at least start a conversation. Okay. I think I can see some really nice shapes that I like. I actually really like that I was able to include a few full pieces of an upper, so you know what it is. And then as well as the scraps, I was able to get some loops in. I was pretty happy that I was able to get this Asics shiny running shoe in there. I'm still not sure if I'll end up keeping the zipper or not. It really depends on how stiff this ends up being, but it's gonna be trial and error for the next couple of steps. Next up, we're gonna do the pinning. The pinning process is very important to my design and anything that I make, whether it's shoes or chairs or, I don't know, any large scale thing too. It's a way to be able to visualize and see a final result without committing. It also helps getting a feel for the material itself and what's gonna be harder to sew, and they're meant for like just holding delicate pieces of fabric together, but I pin them into shoes, I pin them into my body. Oh yeah, I've definitely stabbed myself multiple times. Like, cause sometimes I'm just reckless. I honestly feel like I don't even recognize it. Sometimes I'll be like making a piece and I don't even realize it, but I'll have like a cut and I'm like, oh shit, I need to put a Band-Aid on, like before I bleed on everything. I just feel like it can't be that interesting to watch pinning. For me, it's like therapeutic, but I usually do this while I'm watching like Netflix or something, or listening to crime podcasts, which is usually the case. It actually was better than I thought it was gonna be. I was kind of like not super sure, just in terms of overall composition. Seeing it on kind of helped me understand like balance, and I'd say for the most part pretty well balanced. I definitely needed those little 2 pops that I added in. And then yeah, there's a couple of holes that I need to find a little patch for, and then I feel pretty good about it. I'm just trying to see maybe if there's any of these little open spaces, if I have anything already that's cut, like little pieces of tongues or anything that might be able to snug right into that space. That's kind of nice with the zip detail. Something like that might be kind of nice to add in. So I'm just trimming off some pieces to clean it up a little bit in areas where there's a little bit like overlap off the sides, and just to start getting to the next stages of sewing. I'm actually gonna take a picture of it in case something shifts or falls off. I'll remember where it was. But I mean, this part is very fluid, and if it starts moving in a way that it looks more correct or kind of goes more with the natural shape, I'm always open to start switching up the placement of things as you stitch it on. I think it's time to start sewing. Hand sewing takes a long time, but it's very rewarding. Using machine is faster, but for some reason, I feel like I lose the craftsmanship. Something about the hand sewing process for me, I feel like I have a lot more control over, especially with using such thick materials. I just want to make sure it's precise. I want to feel like I don't know, I'm with the material, I'm one with the material when I'm hand sewing. So I started to use fishing line for these types of projects because it's really durable, because it's meant to be pulled and messed around with, and it's clear, so it also kind of melts into the shoe fabric. That's all, the best way I could describe it, because when you're going through those mesh holes and stuff, it becomes so fine that like you could barely even see it. There's a very blurry line I have found personally between art and fashion, and people ask me that question a lot. They're like, well, what do you consider it? And I'm like, it really depends on the piece, it depends on the day, but I personally just appreciate garments that do their job and just really function well. I think as adults, we end up putting ourselves in a box, and we don't always allow ourselves to explore any kind of weird or crazy ideas that we might have. And I was like that at first. I was like, why am I thinking about packaging materials as a jacket? Like, that doesn't seem like a very natural thing. And I was like, you know what, why don't I just try to make it and see what happens? And if you just allow yourself to explore those weird ideas, something really awesome might come out of it. I think that was the last stitch. I think we finally did it. I'd say one of the harder parts was some of these leather and suede pieces. Just naturally the material is a little less forgiving when you're trying to stick the needle through, but for the most part, I think those open meshes have helped me a lot, and I went through less needles than I normally do on shoes. But my hands are super tired from sewing, and I feel like I got a good hand workout doing this. I'm gonna just trim off some excess threads and anything that's left over, but these are just some finishing touches that I like to do. I think I got all the pins out, but I'm gonna do my magnet trick just to be sure. I use magnets just to kind of feel it around, and if it starts to pick up anything, that means that I maybe had left a pin inside of it. And so I move it around, and it doesn't suck it out, but you can feel if there's something left behind, which I just felt actually. So I'm glad that I used this, because you don't want to put this on and then get poked later on. So I ended up keeping the collar. I think it's gonna look good with a black shirt. I'm just gonna keep it for now. I can always take it off later, and I think that's the beauty of doing custom designs, because you know, this doesn't have to be the final form. I could still adjust it later and add things or take things off as I need to. I pretty much take everything apart after I make it. I get the idea out there, I look at it, I capture it in that moment, and then I take it apart and think about it in a different way. And I've gone through many generations of products and things that have been clothing to furniture, back to clothing, and I really will work with an item till it's just a piece of scrap that's that big, and then maybe it will finally have its final form. But I still think I'm too new in the process to have final forms, because if I continue to do this forever, I can always continue to use these pieces until hopefully something will be good enough to stick. I'm excited about the finished piece. It's very intense and I like that. I think this is more of an art piece. It is fashionable, it's wearable, it has a pocket that functions, but to me, it's kind of bold. It's a little bit crazy to wear that, but it's the concept and the idea of just using materials in a non-traditional sense, and I think that truly captures it.
It's definitely heavy and warm and tactile. It's like a bulletproof shoe vest.
It is daunting to think about the amount of waste, the amount of things that we own and the consumer habits that have been kind of instilled in us. But that doesn't mean that we can't take a step back and choose better options, or at least try to use what we already have instead of buying something that's new. There's simple solutions to getting involved in sustainability. It's really just thinking about what you have. Do I really need this new thing? And if I do, like, can I keep it for a really long time and be able to prolong the life of it? And I say this in a way where it's like, you don't have to be a designer. You don't have to take it to the extreme that I'm doing it. Even if you're not super into designing or wanting to create stuff, there is ways that you can maximize the things that you have.
What's gonna happen with it now?
I mean, honestly, I'll probably end up taking it apart and making it into something else, but I don't know, maybe it'll end up back as a vest someday.